really for many of you, especially if you love melodies, you love existing music, this could be something that would be really interesting for you guys as students. It might be interesting, and maybe there already is something like this, but in future festivals here, to actually have an arranging category where you take an existing piece. We heard a couple of really good ones.
We do have that.
Oh, good, because we heard a couple of really good things yesterday with students that were, had taken rock songs and things like that, but they put their own version to that. So I think that that's a great quality to have. So we're going to talk today about taking existing tunes and doing something unique and interesting to them. The very first thing, and hopefully you all have handouts. Raise your hand if you don't, because my lovely assistant will get you all set up here. Leanne, there's a few back there. So, in the Oxford Dictionary, which is kind of like the be-all, end-all dictionary of music terms, they actually have a whole article devoted to arranging. And it's interesting how in this article it talks about arranging being in a spectrum, right? So it says that in the sense in which it's commonly used among musicians, the word arranging may be taken to mean either the transference of a composition from one medium to another, or the elaboration or simplification of a piece with or without a change of medium. In other words, on one end, you could actually just be literally transcribing your favorite rock song, note for note, onto the page, and maybe it's a solo or something like that. We call that a transcription. So that's very literal. There's not a lot of creativity. Maybe it's a string quartet that you're playing in a band at school, and you transfer it to different saxophones. So there's an arranging from medium to medium, but there's not a lot of creativity involved, but you're changing that. On the other hand, it says, or the elaboration or simplification of a piece without change of medium. In either case, some degree of recomposition is usually involved, and the result may vary from a straightforward, almost literal transcription to a paraphrase, which is more the work of an arranger than the original composer. So you can almost have it to the point where you don't even recognize the tune, right? And so we can see examples of that all through music history. If you think about the origins of arranging, our instrument right here, of course, before the piano we had clavichords, harpsichords, and many of the original versions of original pieces that were written for the keyboard in the early 1600s, late 1500s were arrangements. What they really wanted to do is get those really popular songs, lute pieces, they wanted to transfer them over to the keyboard so you could play them in different venues. There's a great example for John Dowland wrote a song called Flow My Tears, which is this really sad kind of love song from the late 1500s. It's got great word painting. Downward motions of being sad, right? Da, 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 da. So William Byrd, one of the very early writers for the keyboard, took that and did what he called the pavane lacrymae. Lacrymae means tears. And so he writes his version, and you can find recordings of that. One of the first examples I can think of a keyboard arrangement of an actual very popular song of the day. In the 16 and 1700s, it remained popular. Bach, for example, transcribed, he loved Vivaldi. So he transcribed a lot of those Vivaldi concertos for keyboard or organ or some combination of those instruments. So in essence, he was arranging Vivaldi, and so we can see examples of that. We see this later on in the classical and romantic era. Lots of interest in, for example, Brahms arranging a series of variations on a piece that Haydn had written, for example. Or Liszt, for example, doing arrangements of popular art songs or opera themes of the day. One of my favorite stories was in, you can actually find this online, 1823, I think it is. So if you do the math, Liszt is about 12 years old, like many of you. And there's a program, you can Google and find this online, that about 3/4 of the way down this program, he's giving it in Manchester for a bunch of English audiences, and it says, an extemporary fantasy on any theme proposed by the esteemed audience. So basically, they could shout out, hey, we would love to hear Così fan tutti, can you play something from Mozart's opera? Or we would love to hear a Schubert art song, or something like that. And this little 12-year-old kid would just compose his own virtuosic arrangement. And that was a very common thing in the 1800s, to have a portion of the recital devoted to what we often see at this festival, things that we've seen John and other people do here, taking some existing idea, just going off on a tangent. And unfortunately, we don't see that as much in the last 100, 150 years. Arthur mentioned this kind of dedication to the score and being afraid to do anything that's not on the written score. But we do see it in things like jazz and blues, right? And so we see jazz and popular music. Arranging has been a big part of jazz from the very beginning. In fact, most of your jazz pieces are actually arrangements of songs of the day, Broadway songs. So something like All the Things You Are, a jazz musician or a group of musicians would get, you know. So they'll take that existing tune that's very popular and put their own spin on it. So that, of course, is a big part of what jazz is. And then popular music is the same way, right? So taking existing versions, Mannheim Steamroller maybe is an example of taking a classical kind of based Christmas song and doing some kind of really fun rock and roll arrangement of it during Christmas time. So the point is that we are in a culture where we're used to arranging. And so what I thought it would be really fun to do is just to kind of go through a little bit of this and to show you a recent arrangement that I've been working on and different parts of the arrangement that I think about, and maybe as you guys are putting this together and putting your own together, that you can be thinking about as well. So, initial arranging questions. And I'm sorry we're going so quickly through this, but any questions you have, we'll open that up at the end, and I promise to leave some time for you to ask anything that doesn't make sense as we take this whirlwind tour. First off is thinking about a piece, a song that you're going to arrange. A big part of arranging, of course, is taking a song that you feel like you can do something with, or maybe put a considerable improvement upon. These songs, I remember a college professor once telling me, because I wanted to set a series of Robert Frost poems, and he says, well, you know, these poems are pretty amazing and they're kind of epic. To do something like that, you need to have the confidence to say, I can do something better than Robert Frost did with these poems. I can actually considerably improve this. And that kind of scared me away. I picked really crappy poems after that. But with that said, you know, you can think about these songs that you're doing and is there something that you can do with these? Many of these can be something that you that really means something to you. Maybe it's a pop song you love, maybe you love this band and you just want to do your own version of it because you love it so much. Or maybe it's something that's really simple, but you feel like you might be able to elaborate on it. It could be something very complex. I mean, arranging is the opposite sometimes. If I get an assignment from my publisher to arrange an easier version of Flight of the Bumblebee, and I've got to figure out a way to make that accessible and easier to play, you can also take arrangements and make them simpler too. So that's another possibility. If there's a piece you love, but you'd love to kind of simplify it and make it a little bit easier for you, that's something you can do. So what I'll often do is I'll kind of live with the piece a little bit. I'll listen to it, I'll kind of think about it, it'll be in my head, and then I'll start playing around with some of these other questions. For example, what should my medium be? For many of us that would be piano solo, but many of you play other instruments or you have friends that play instruments. How fun would it be to kind of start expanding some of your things if you've got a group of kids at school that you play with, or different friends that play different instruments, and you could put together your own arrangement of it. I tell you, there's no bigger rush, and some of you kids have already experienced this, than to have somebody else play your piece. And even better than that, to have a big group of people to play your piece. So when I hear orchestras or choral groups or other things, big groups of people doing my pieces, what a rush. It's better than any drug I've ever heard of. It's just addicting. It's really, 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 really fun. So that might be something you consider. I think most of your orchestra teachers, your band teachers at school, they'd be thrilled if you said, hey, you know what, I've put a band version of Radioactive by Imagine Dragons. I've got it scored for band, and would you guys be willing to read it? Any band director would say, that's awesome, let's do it. In fact, if it's good enough, we'll put it on a program and put on a concert. And I'll tell you, it's super cool when that happens. So, what can I do unique and original to the song? That's the last thing that you have to decide. It's not an arrangement if you do it exactly like the original. So if you love Yanni or other some kind of new age, and you kind of do your own new age arrangement of it, well, it's kind of already been done, right? So you have to think about a new twist and a new way to put that together.